Welcome to Rock Legends 2025. Bands, tours, and history. I'm Lydia, and joining me today is John. And let me tell you, John, we're about to dive into a band that truly defined an era. A band that blew up the music business, literally, with pyrotechnics and stagecraft. We're talking, of course, about Kiss.
Lydia, it's great to be here. And when you say blew up, you really mean it. Kiss isn't just a band, it's a phenomenon, a brand, a controversy, and arguably one of the most theatrical acts to ever grace a stage. I mean, from their origins to their epic comeback, their story is just wild. We're going to cover the whole journey today, from their humble beginnings to their unmasking and reinvention. Get ready for a deep dive into the fire.
Absolutely. It's easy to think of Kiss and immediately picture the makeup, the platforms, the fire-breathing Gene Simmons. But before all that, before the comic books and the stadium tours, they were just nobodies. Can you imagine Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley playing high school cafeterias?
It's almost impossible, right? But that's exactly where they started. Picture this. They're filling in last minute for Suzi Quatro's brothers band, of all people, playing to confused teenagers during lunchtime in some Canadian high school. Not exactly the packed arenas we associate with them. They even called themselves Wicked Lester for a bit. Can you believe it?
Wicked Lester. That's a deep cut right there. And the industry just didn't get them. They were too loud, too visual, too everything. Critics famously called them Bogart's Folly later on, but even before that, labels were just scratching their heads. Or slamming their doors, rather.
Exactly. They couldn't fit them into a neat little box. They weren't punk, they weren't exactly glam, they weren't traditional hard rock. They were this bizarre, loud, visual spectacle, and no one knew what to do with them. It took a true maverick to see their potential, or at least to take a huge gamble.
And that maverick was Neil Bogart, the head of Casablanca Records. He saw something, didn't he? Or maybe he just had an incredibly high tolerance for risk. Because signing Kiss was a massive gamble, especially for a label that was known for disco.
Oh, a massive gamble. Bogart was a showman himself. He didn't just sign them, he threw lavish parties to launch them. There's this infamous story from the Century Plaza Hotel where they performed, and it was so bombastic, so loud, so Kiss, that people actually fled. Can you imagine being at a record launch party and thinking, nope, too much, gotta go?
That's amazing. It really highlights the clash between Bogart's pop instincts and Kiss's undeniable hard rock identity. They often disagreed, didn't they? Like the time he secretly released Kissin' Time as a single after promising he wouldn't. He knew it would be a hit, but they wanted to stay heavy.
Yeah, exactly. That song was originally by Bobby Rydell, a total pop track. Bogart saw the commercial potential, but the band was like, no way, that's not us. But you know, despite these disagreements, or maybe because of them, they pushed forward. That tension, that drive, it's what forged the band's identity.
And part of that identity was the makeup. This wasn't just paint, it was armor. They refused to be seen without it. It cultivated this incredible mystique. I remember reading stories about security literally pulling film out of fans' cameras to preserve the illusion. That's dedication.
It was absolutely crucial to their early image. They created these larger-than-life personas, the demon, the star child, the spaceman, the catman. And the makeup made them almost mythical. Gene Simmons, the demon, even took it a step further by learning to breathe fire. Not in some fancy training facility, mind you.
Tell me about it. A bald magician, right? In a rehearsal room, scorch marks on the ceiling. That's the stuff of legends. It shows their commitment to the spectacle. They weren't just playing music, they were putting on a show, an experience. And that's what really set them apart.
Absolutely. That fire breathing, those pyrotechnics, the wild stage presence, it all coalesced into this irresistible force. And it led to an explosion of fame. Suddenly, Kiss wasn't just a band, they were omnipresent. Explosive tours, comic book crossovers with Marvel, even that bizarre Hanna-Barbera film, Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park. They were everywhere.
Oh, Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park. A truly cinematic masterpiece. But it just shows how big they got. From action figures to lunchboxes, Kiss was a brand. And yet, Gene and Paul would later recall some genuinely baffling moments, like fans not knowing who they were during kissing contests meant to promote the band.
Yeah, it's wild, isn't it? This huge, iconic band, and they're doing these promotional stunts, and people are just like, who are these guys in makeup? It speaks to how quickly their image outgrew their musical identity for some, but also how pervasive the image itself became, even detached from the individuals behind it. They really were masters of controlled chaos at that point.
It truly was. But then came 1978, a year that was both a peak and, looking back, the beginning of the fracture. Neil Bogart, ever the strategist, encouraged the release of 4 solo albums, one for each band member. He thought it would appease rising tensions within the group, give everyone their own moment.
And what an idea it was, on paper. 4 albums released simultaneously by the 4 members of KISS. It was unprecedented, and the results were varied, to say the least. Ace Frehley's solo album surprised everyone, showing a real melodic sensibility that maybe hadn't been fully appreciated within the band. It was a genuine rock album.
Ace's album was a standout, definitely. It's often cited as the best of the 4. Then you had Gene's, which was a celebrity circus. Cher, Joe Perry, Bob Seger, Donna Summer. It was just excess-filled, over the top, a guest list that could fill an awards show. It was very Gene in a way.
Total Gene, absolutely. Paul's was solid, showcasing his songwriting prowess, and Peter Criss's was more R&B influenced, reflecting his roots. Despite selling hundreds of thousands of copies, the stunt, while commercially successful, really exposed the fault lines. Everyone had their own vision, and those visions weren't always aligned with KISS as a collective.
And those fault lines deepened, didn't they? The late 70s and early 80s were a rough time. Peter Criss and Ace Frehley, the Catman and the Spaceman, fell into serious issues with addiction and unreliability. It really started to unravel the core of the band.
Yeah, it was heartbreaking to witness from the outside, and I can only imagine what it was like for Gene and Paul, who had such a clear vision for the band. Peter was the first to go. His drumming became erratic, his presence inconsistent. It reached a point where it was simply unsustainable for the band to continue with him.
And then Ace followed. He was equally talented but struggled with his demons too. For Gene and Paul, who had birthed this entire phenomenon, watching their original partners, their friends, essentially self-destruct and eventually depart, must have been an incredibly painful experience. It wasn't just a band falling apart, it was a personal unraveling of their vision.
Absolutely. They built this thing from the ground up, and to see 2 of the foundational members succumb to those pressures and issues, it's a profound loss, both personally and creatively. For a time, it felt like the essence of KISS was fading, despite their efforts to keep it alive with new members.
And this leads us to another pivotal moment, the unmasking. By the early 80s, the makeup, which had once been their armor, their mystique, started to feel like a burden. Sales were dropping, the image felt a bit stagnant, and the band desperately needed a change, a reinvention.
It's such a bold move, isn't it? To shed the very thing that made you famous. But they were losing relevance, and that makeup was becoming a cage. Paul Stanley in particular was the one pushing hardest for it. He felt they needed to prove themselves as musicians, to show their faces and stand on the merits of their music.
Exactly. They teased it with Creatures of the Night, an album that still had that heavy sound but was a transitional period. And then, finally, with Lick It Up in 1983, they did it. They revealed their faces to the world on MTV. It was a massive moment.
And what happened? Sales surged. It was a brilliant, necessary gamble that paid off. It injected new life into the band. Suddenly, they were seen as a contemporary rock act, not just a nostalgic cartoon. It allowed them to explore new sounds, new imagery, and connect with a new generation of fans who might have dismissed them as a novelty.
It was a true testament to their resilience and adaptability. To be able to reinvent themselves like that, after establishing such an iconic and rigid image, it takes guts. And the stories from that unmasked era, the tours, the personal journeys of Gene and Paul, are just as wild as the makeup days.
Oh, absolutely. From laser ladders on stage to the various lawsuits, including one with Marvel over character rights. And don't forget the derailed movies and the infamous 24-hour limousine rides that became a kind of mobile office and party hub. They've seen it all. Gene and Paul in particular have been candid about the excess, the mistakes, and the sheer perseverance it took to keep KISS alive.
They really do reflect on it with a certain amount of brutal honesty now. The struggle to grow as artists when the world wanted them frozen in grease paint, as you said. It's a constant battle for any iconic band, but for KISS, the image was so powerful that it almost overshadowed everything else. They had to fight to be seen as musicians first and foremost.
And they did. They not only survived but thrived, even going back to the makeup for reunion tours and showing that both identities could coexist. Their story is a masterclass in marketing, reinvention, and just sheer stubborn rock and roll will. It's about understanding your audience but also knowing when to challenge their expectations. And the friendship between Gene and Paul, through all the ups and downs, is really the bedrock of it all.
It really is. The enduring partnership of Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons, through the fame, the fallout, the lineup changes, the unmasking, and the rebirth, is what makes KISS more than just a band. It's a legacy. They defined what a rock spectacle could be, and they influenced countless artists who came after them.
A legacy indeed. From high school cafeterias to blowing up arenas worldwide, KISS's journey is one for the history books. They broke rules, they broke barriers, and they definitely broke a few eardrums along the way.
And that, my friends, was the unfiltered rise, fall, and transformation of Kiss, a band that truly lived up to its legendary status. If this deep dive into the firestorm of rock history moved you, made you want to put on some Detroit Rock City, then make sure to follow Rock Legends 2025 for more epic stories like this.
We've got so many more legends to explore, so don't miss out. Until next time, stay loud, stay legendary.